Welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast, where we stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance. And today we have a very special guest in. We have one of Matt's good friends that he met at the local YMCA when he used to work there. Her name is Esther Chester, which I think is a super cool name. But she's coming to share her story, and we're going to ask her some questions, get to know some stuff that she went through that I think is going to be very, very motivational and some very good information to learn from her. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Esther, like where you're from and just all that good stuff?
Yes. Thank you so much. So my name is Esther Chester. As you can see, it rhymes very well. Don't ask God to give you a rhyming name. I thought it would be like something like Esther Johnson, but it was Esther Chester. I am from Burundi, Africa. It's a very small country in Central Africa. Like most people usually barely can find it. But I grew up in Kenya. And I came to the States when I was 13 years old. So I have been here for more than half of my life, and it has been amazing. I am married and I have 4 wonderful children, and they are ages of 8 and 21 months. So they keep me on my toes.
Very cool.
But yeah, so I was a stay-at-home mom, and recently I just accepted a job at the learning center. So I'll be like, a working mom. Not that I wasn't a working mom.
Yeah.
And you just finished your schooling, right?
Yes, actually, I just submitted the last assignment last night, and that was, it was refreshing.
Very good.
Yes.
Why don't you give us a brief, what was life like that you knew in Africa?
It's like, when I was there, I was like, what? I was born in Burundi, but I didn't really know much about Burundi because my family had to flee from Burundi to go to Kenya when I was like only 2 years old. So I don't remember much about my young days in Burundi. But the stories that I was told, I don't know if you ever heard of the genocide of Rwanda. But it
yes,
was,
yeah. Is that when you were around? You were a kid, roughly?
Yes, I was around 2 at that time, and that's when there was like, Burundi and Rwanda have always have a lot of like tribal issues and civil wars. And so that time there was a genocide, there was like Christian persecution. Just to backtrace a little bit, my mom and my dad are all like ministers, and there was a lot of Christian persecution at that time, and my dad was imprisoned. And so my mom had to flee with 4 children out of the country. So there was like a lot of story that I had, and I was told even when I went back home with different family members. So it was like a pretty hard time during that time. But we went to Kenya. We actually went to different countries before reaching to Kenya. But I remember we got to Kenya in 1994, and that's where I was until I was 13, and then I came here. But it was pretty rough in the beginning. So, yeah.
But yeah, when you were saying when you were a kid and the whole genocide thing going on, what was the number one kind of obstacle that you saw your family have to overcome?
It's always been going to a different country, and is the biggest obstacle going to a different country is the culture change. You have to go for example, back home in Burundi, the name is said differently, or like the way you write the name is different. The food is different and the language is different. So there's a lot of like social differences. And for me, much of Burundi I didn't know, but like in Kenya is where I had to find my footing in different culture. Like, even if I grew up there since I was 2, I was still a foreigner.
Right.
There was like Kenya has a lot of different languages. Like it's not the basic 3. They speak Swahili, English, and their tribal language. So there's at least more than 30 tribal languages in Kenya. So you have like different groups that get together because of their language. So when you are like an outsider, you always try to find a way of fitting in. So it was different, but you kind of find a way of overcoming it. And for me, that's where faith has been the biggest role play in my life. it has helped me like overcome a lot of challenges. And honestly, looking back, if it wasn't for my faith, I don't even know where I will be right now.
Yeah.
I'll probably be crumbled down somewhere.
I mean, that's incredible, because you think about just here, in America, we can worship or have faith without persecution. You said, and you just shared that your dad was in prison because of his faith, and I assume he still maintained his faith even through all that stuff. Right? I mean, right?
Yes.
And that is incredible.
Well, it's your faith being kind of tested.
Right. Oh,
Yes.
100%. Like truly tested. Yeah. How did your parents, were they always, around church? Or I guess how'd they get introduced to their faith, or how did your whole family get into their faith?
My dad was the first one to join the faith, and I don't know much about like his background on that, but I know like right now he's a bishop of like a lot of different churches. He has helped. He has a lot of pastors under him that he mentors, but at that time he was the only pastor in my family, because right now my mom is a pastor too, and my mom was a teacher. But my mom's side of the family was also part of the family where the first democratic president was in. So like my great uncle was the first democratic president of Burundi, and that caused a lot of like havoc, because when he got assassinated, that also puts our family in danger, and that's one of the other reasons that we had to flee. So my dad was, because of his faith and because of like the role he was playing, because even though like there was persecution, Christianity has always been accepted back home, but it was just more like the tribal issue part of it is the one that was the, how do I put it, like the main friction.
Gotcha.
So like so Christianity was just like casualty in it. And so like my dad was, part of it was because of his faith, and part of it was also because of the tribe that he was in, which there's 3 tribes: Hutus, Tutsis, and Twas. And I'm a Hutu, so my family is a Hutu, and Hutu in Burundi is the majority and the Tutsis were the minority, but they were also favored by the colonies that were in Burundi. So it's a lot of factors that plays into it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, I remember actually studying this in history class, and I apologize. My history is probably a little rusty when it comes to this. So sorry, what were the 2 tribes again as well? I didn't want to pronounce.
Well, there was the 3 tribes, the
right?
Hutu and the Tutsis and the Twas. But the Twas, you don't hear them. You don't hear from them that much.
I don't remember hearing about those.
Yes, those ones are usually like the country. They're like up in the mountains, like mountain tribe. So like the main focus was usually the Hutu, and the Tutsis is the friction you always hear about. Right,
and then the genocide, was it the I want to say the Tutsis were trying to kill the Hutus, right? Or do I have that backwards? I apologize. I can't.
Oh no, you are fine. Yeah. This is something that I also had to learn too, because obviously it was history that took place when I was only a child. Yeah, I was a kid, and so like Burundi and Rwanda used to be one country, so we share a lot of like similarities. Like the language is almost the same, just like a dialect different, and so the culture is the same. And also tribes are the same. We have Hutus, Tutsis, but then the only difference is the genocide that took place in Rwanda was different than the genocide that took place in Burundi. Gotcha. So in Rwanda, there was like where it was the Hutus killing the Tutsis, and then in Burundi, it was the Tutsis killing the Hutus.
Gotcha.
From like the memory that I could be wrong, but that's what I remember being told, and the stories that I was told their own. Like until today, that's the same friction that still take place, where it's settled, but it's still something that goes on behind the closed doors, if you ask me. But the genocide was like a complete difference in one country and the other one. Yeah. So like there used to be one country, but during the colonization, they were separated because, like the European countries came in and they were trying to fight for power. So they got split up into a different country.
Okay.
Yes.
Your father's no longer imprisoned?
No, he's not. He was released.
Who set him free?
I don't remember exactly what went on. Obviously, during the genocide, there had to be a lot of intervention, especially from the UN.
Mhm.
So I don't remember exactly how it was released, but I remember him joining us back in Kenya. It was either Kenya or one of the countries we had to go to before we reached Kenya. So I exactly don't know what happened or what took place. Maybe it was the reconciliation that was going on between, because you can imagine when a genocide takes place, there's gonna be a lot of like intervention coming from outside for
Right.
healing process. So I don't know exactly when he was released. I never really asked that question. We don't ask that many questions back home.
Sure.
So that's one of the biggest culture
Right.
thing. Like, I didn't know my mom's and my dad's names until later on when
Oh,
I was
wow.
older. So like the culture there is very different on like addressing adults, and you don't call your mom by their name. So, and you don't ask them personal questions. So it's some of the things I asked actually after I got here. So
Gotcha. So you just always called mom. It wasn't
yes.
It wasn't actually her name, her name.
Yeah,
or
we don't.
whatever.
Yeah, you
Gotcha.
never call your mother by their first
right.
name. Otherwise, you're gonna be getting spanking. So that was actually one of the culture shocks that I faced when I came here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because when I had kids call their parents by name, I was like, what?
Well,
And
that's a newer thing. It wasn't. That's not.
Oh yeah, I know.
I mean, my kids call me dad, but sometimes to be funny, they'll call me by my first name. But that's not something that's been the American culture from the beginning.
Yeah, I always called my mom and dad.
Yeah.
Dad
Right,
mom
but
as well too.
But I bet we would feel a lot more comfortable, like, hey, Dad, asking him about what just happened to him.
Right.
Mean, that wouldn't be something that's necessarily off limits or anything.
See, like it's like the part over there, it was like taken even in a broader aspect, because even when adults addressed each other, sometimes we'll be like, you'll be Casey's dad. Like, I'll be talking to somebody, like, I might be talking to you and I'll be like, hey, Casey dad is asking for this. Like I won't be saying like, hey, Matt is asking for this.
Right.
So like anybody that is older than you, it was either uncle or auntie.
Well, I mean, going back to the why, I bet, was it kind of a surprise to you that, the kids would call you Miss Esther instead of,
just
by your last name?
By the last name.
Yeah.
So, it's been like, I think I've been somewhat a little bit Americanized. so trying to like get the balance, because that's something I had to, after I had kids, I had to figure out how to balance those social changes,
Right.
like, it's culture. So yeah.
So you and I got to know each other at the Y.
Yes.
I probably teased you all the time. And then after a while, when I got comfortable, I finally asked you, I said, what happened to your hands?
Oh, yes. This is like the one question that like somebody will ask or somebody will want to know how to ask.
Right.
And this actually happened not long after we got to Kenya. And back home, we use like open stoves. So it's kind of like a charcoal grill, but like sitting very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
And I was outside and I was wearing one of those princess dresses. So it was like nylon. Mm-hmm. And obviously we know nylon is very flammable. And I was walking by and the wind blew and my dress caught on fire. So I was trying to put it off. I guess at that time I did not drop and roll.
Right. You're trying to put it out with your, I assume, with your hands.
With my hands. That's why my hand, and it was on my right side. So like my right hand and my right leg are the ones that got affected more. And so it was a pretty traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I don't remember the pain that went with it. Right now I just like remember the memories of the pain, but like not feeling the pain. I don't know if that makes sense.
Hospitalized or anything? I don't remember.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I had several surgery because this one was a clump. Like my hand was like it was like pretty much ground meat. So
really?
Yeah, so like they had to split my fingers apart to make individual. Actually, there was like a talk of amputation. Obviously, back then it wasn't like the hospitals didn't have like the same like resources that you have over here. So there was like a talk of amputation and everything. So my mom was my champ there because she was actually going to college at that time. And she had to travel like very far away to like come and join me. But she was my advocate. And so I never forget that because she's the one that talked to them about, no, there's going to be a way, like, so they decided to do what they can do. So I have my hand, thanks to my mom, and I can do pretty much anything that you can do with your right hand or with your left hand. So so that was like a blessing and everything, and it was quite of a life experience and a faith experience too. So faith grew at that point too. So.
And did they have to like nerve wise? What was the nerve damage? I mean, did you have to go like therapy?
I don't remember going. I don't think at that time we had something like that, but I don't remember going to therapy. My mom was my therapist.
Okay.
So because the bills were getting at that time, my dad was out of the country again because of him being a bishop. He has to travel in different countries for speaking events, and then getting like funds and everything like that. So my dad was out of the country, so my mom was doing all this all by herself, and maybe some neighbors helping, but I don't remember having therapy. Like I just remember the hospital was expensive, and we had to actually leave before I got healed, like or even in the healing process of it, or like
right. So probably no insurance, right? It's all
I don't think we had everything. It was like out of pocket,
right.
So I don't remember exactly the financial parts of it, but like I remember we had to leave the hospital before I was discharged. Mm-hmm. So I had to be discharged early. So my mom had to be the doctor and everything at home. So she had to do all the dressing of my hand and my legs. So it was pretty much like. Yeah.
What was your mom going to college for at the time?
She was going, oh my goodness, I don't remember exactly what she was going to college for at that time, but she later on went back for ministry.
Okay, I say not a nurse or anything, right?
Yeah, no, nothing. I think she became a nurse after I got injured, because that was like a lot. You think about it, it's not like just a small burn. You're dealing with like
you said it's on your leg.
Yeah, my
too,
leg.
right?
Like I have a white spot on my leg because the pigments, like my pigments, were burned.
Wow.
So like my skin, I had lost. My skin was like peeled up to the top. Everything like just, I don't know how to say it properly, but like pretty much I have like bumps on my legs where the skin like kind of came together. Gotcha. And then I lost some muscles on that area. You can tell that it's dented. It's like so it was pretty much a big surface to take care of it if you're not, especially in Africa where you don't have the resources that you need to do home care, So I bow my hat to my mom.
And how old was that? How old were you when that happened?
I was 5. Yes, I was 5 because it happened in 1996. So I was 5 at that time, and yeah, so that's what I used when I teach my kids in preschool. When I was working at YMCA, I was like, hey, you don't play with fire. This is what happens. So we always talk about it. I'm like, when they ask me about my hand, I always tell them I was like, about your AIDS, so that has been like a connecting factor with the kids. Right? Yeah. Well, I hope they didn't touch anything.
So okay, so take us up to the point at 13 when you come over here. How did
that happen? So when I was 13, actually before that, my family, we started like pretty much living in Kenya. So it started with my dad has always like left the country for going to different countries. Then my older sister and my older brother, they came to the state with a student visa. So they were, I think they came in 2001. And then my mother went back to my country. So all my parents were out of the country, and then we stayed with my uncle, and my cousins, they also left to go to Canada. So my family started just pretty much living. So it was just me, my younger sister, and my younger brother that were left in Kenya, and we lived with a family friend. And then eventually we decided to live on our own because sometimes living with
when you were 13, you're saying.
Yes, at this time I was 12.
Okay, 12.
Yes.
and you're moving out.
So my parents were already living. That's why I was trying to figure out like, how do I put this? Because in American culture, this will come straight up as abuse. But, in different situations that you face in a third world country are so different when you face them in a developed country. So like, over there, that would have been somewhat normal. But, so I was 12, and I can't remember how old my youngest brother was, but it was the 3 of us. The youngest one went with my mom, and we lived with with a family friend, but then because of like them having kids and us getting along, I requested that we just stay in our house. And my dad had hooked us up with, he had a friend who owned a store. So all I had to do is just go to the store, grab whatever I needed, so 12 here in America is not going to be compared to 12 over there. Like the maturity level is so very, very different. Like I felt like when I came here, like I felt like I was going to school with younger kids compared to kids my own age, just because of like the things that you have to do, like
the amount of responsibility you have.
So it might sound young, and yes, it is young, but like you have like life experiences to like build you up to that point. Like, back then we walked to school pretty much everywhere. Like, you're like 5 and you're walking to like school like 5 miles away or like 2 miles away. Rain or shine.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, like, the situations, like the culture difference might affect the take on it.
You're just saying that in America we're soft.
That happens. It happens depending with like the situation that you have. Like I feel like even over here before like everything got developed, like you'll hear stories on Facebook like how like your parents will be like, in my days we used to walk or like climb mountains before we can get to school. So, but for us, it was like the same thing, going to school like 7 a.m., coming back home at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., and then go back to school again for night school. Right. That was like for middle school. So it's culture difference. But so we lived there by ourselves, but we had to go back to my country to visit. And when we went to visit, when I was 13, we went there for vacation. And there was a civil war that happened. So this is the first time I'm visiting Burundi, or the second time I'm visiting Burundi for like just a short vocational between schools. I was in 8th grade at that time, and thinking I'm going for a short break and then just going back to school and do like the biggest exam that we have. If you don't pass that, you don't go to high school. So it was like a big stressor. But there was a civil war that happened when I was there. And I remember like gunshots going up, and there was like an explosion that happened like right in front of our house. So you could hear everything. I remember that scaring the heck out of me. There was like people that died, and it was pretty. This time I was able actually to be old enough to remember all of that. And then after that experience, my dad pretty much like told me and my sister that we are coming to the States. So that was like one of the push that took place for us to come. Obviously, if my dad could bring all of us, we could all come. But like he set it up for me and my sister to come. So
how much of your family is still there?
Well, over there, like the immediate family, like pretty much everybody is there apart from the 4 of us that came to the States. Okay. But my older sister also went back to Kenya. So she took what she learned here, and then she's going over there to work with youth and do different projects over there.
Oh, that's really
and
cool.
Then my brother is doing, after graduating from college, Malone College, he's doing ministry in India. So he's a missionary in India, and then working with different groups. Yeah.
Are your parents still there, or?
Yes, both of my parents are back in Burundi with my younger siblings. So they're still there.
What's the youngest sibling you have?
He's 19 or I think he's 19 somewhere
How
there.
many siblings?
That's my next question too. Okay.
Yeah. I have 2 siblings that are there. I used to have 3, but one passed away when he was 14.
Okay,
so that was like, one of the hardest things. But so yeah, now I have 2. Actually, I correct that. I have 3. I have a half brother, older half brother. So 3 siblings. Yes. But I don't know if I answered your question about coming from there to here.
I mean, was it okay? This war breaks out and like middle of the night, you leave, or was it a
it was like
prepared?
It was a prepared one. This was a prepared because it happened at night, and then it wasn't as big compared to the genocide or the other ones. It's like where the rebel groups like start a fight, and then there's like the country was able to take it under control, and then so you have like some moments of peace.
Yeah.
So like my dad was able to arrange that, and then we were able to, because I think if it was like the same as before, we wouldn't be in Burundi. We would have to leave and then go to a different country.
Yeah, that's the same thing I was going to ask. Is like, did you guys, even though it maybe even the first time, did you guys have to like, it was kind of like a special operation where you guys had to like sneak out in the middle of the night or something like that to try to get out of that area, or is it?
Not on this one. Not like when I came, when we left to come here. The first one was that one, because that's the that's where it was very, very bad. Like they had to go through the jungle and everything. So like that happened when I was 2. And
your family went through the jungle?
Yeah, my family had to go because to cross over to a different country.
Do you care to share the brief summary of the trip to escape from that?
Yeah, so like what I remember, like what I was told, and the story that I was told with other family members that were able to assist my parents was like, it happened in the middle of the night, so where everybody was getting killed, and there were use of machetes. So like like my great uncle, the one I told you about, he was like sliced up and with machetes. And so this is like where you have to run away through different ways where it's less traveled on, so you can hide. And traveling with 4 kids, and like I was 2, so my younger sister was probably 1.
Wow.
And my let's see, if I was 2, then my brother was 5 years old and my sister was 8. So your oldest kid is 8 and the youngest is 1, and you're like trying to hide
in the jungle.
In the jungle,
right.
And trying to keep your kids quiet, So like that was like my mom was sharing that experience, and apparently I was a crier too. So so it didn't help the situation much. So like we were able to get away. I can't remember exactly like how we get past all the jungle thing. I remember we had to go from Burundi to Zaire, which is now Congo. So
it's not the Congo jungle, you're saying?
Well, I don't know exactly how much of it was part of it. I just know right now it's called Congo. Back then it was called Zaire.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so we had to go through there, and then before going to a different country. So obviously you're not taking a bus.
Right. You guys were probably walking, right?
So this is probably walking and hiding. So I have never like asked that much in detail, like, but this is the stories that I was told, just going to visit there. Like there's a lot of like forestry areas in Burundi. So I can imagine like how it is. And we lived in the countryside at that time. So I can imagine how much hard it was, because it's not just a flat place you're walking. This is going up the hill, down the hill, and everything. So I tip my hat to my mom again. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
When you get to the States, where do you land? Where do you first?
When we first came, we landed, I believe, in Washington, D.C., because that was like I remember like visiting a family friend there before coming to Cincinnati. Cincinnati was like the place where we stayed there for a while. So
because you had other family there?
Family friends. So
you
like
said Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah, Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay. So Ohio was pretty much like my first, like where we settled in. Like, Washington, D.C., we just visited for like a couple nights while we get rested. I think I said that right. We rested for a couple of days there, and then we took a Greyhound bus. I believe it was a Greyhound bus that we took to Cincinnati, because I don't think we flew from Washington, D.C. But yeah, we got to Cincinnati, and that's where we started. That's where we went. I went to high school there for my ninth grade. And then I came here for my half of my 10th grade year.
That's Mount Vernon. How did you end up in Mount Vernon?
Yes, you actually went to Mount Vernon High School then.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you guys get to Mount Vernon?
So that's a pretty good question. That's the question I always asked, like, why Mount Vernon? How Mount Vernon?
Right.
So my dad, like I mentioned, he's a pastor. And so like over time, the political situation changed a little bit. So he's part of like the Christian association in Burundi that works with the presidential, whatever, like office and everything. So he went to Uganda to represent the country in a Christian conference that was hosted by a Ugandan presidential office. And the family here in Mount Vernon, they without like naming them, but like she did dance, like prophetic dancing. I don't know if you ever heard of prophetic dancing. Like
prophetic dancing?
Prophetic dancing, yes.
What is that?
So it's pretty much like, where, have you ever heard of like the word prophetic? Like where you can...
Actually, I don't know what prophetic is. I apologize.
So no, it's like where we believe like, God speaks to us.
Like prophecy.
Yeah, it's like prophecy.
Oh, gotcha. Now I gotcha.
So
but I've never heard of it. Prophetic dance.
Yeah. Well, it's like where like you can, just the way you can like hear the words, you can also like interpret it in dance. Like you've had like interpretation dancing, right? So it's the same way, like where you can hear like the word love and you can dance it out. Like, like love over somebody, or like, somebody might be going through depression and you can hear like the words to dance. So like everybody has a different gifting. And so sometimes you can also do it through dancing. Or like sometimes we can call it interpretive. I can say
interpretive.
That yes, what you said. Dancing. So, but anyway, so like she had a team of women who were part of the dance team, and they actually went to Uganda from here. And believe it or not, they met there.
Really?
So like, yeah. Okay. So Mom Brennan met my dad in Uganda.
Uganda, wow.
And the next thing, I'm in Cincinnati. The next thing I know, hey, you guys are going to Mount Vernon. I've never heard of Mount Vernon before, so it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
And you've been here ever since.
And I've been. I thought I was going to go to like a bigger city when I graduated or something, but you know what? Mount Vernon stick to me. So yeah.
What was the transition like living here? Like going from, you said you went to 10th grade in Mount Vernon, 9th grade in Cincinnati. So what was that transition like compared to here versus, from
back home?
Yeah, back home.
It was well, back home it was the school system was different, obviously, and like I mentioned, like, for us, we went to school, like, 7 a.m., like, 7 a.m. to like 4 p.m. That was actually elementary. And then, that was like elementary. And then for like upper levels, we went to school until 5. And then if you're like 7th grade or 8th grade, at that time, or 7th and 8th, you had night school. So like we're pretty much in school, like... So like when I go here, it was like different because you have like very short hours, and then everybody still complain about the short hours. So I was still going through like the culture shock and the differences, like over there, we had our test books and all our notes. We had to take all our notes, like, so over here again, when you get like a little bit writing assignment, there was complaint. So for me, it looked like it was like less work. Compared to over there, but other than that, it was like more developed. It was more developed compared to over there. Other than that, I didn't see that much differences, like other than what I just mentioned. Yeah, it's I think it's matter of like the resources that you have and what you have to work with.
Right.
Yeah. Over time, I think I adjusted to the school system here.
Right. Yeah. What tell us about how I think you kind of already covered this, but how important is your faith for like everything you went through and just up to this point in your life?
Oh man, like I think I always reflect back on this one, because faith for me has been like the biggest thing. Yes, I grew up in a Christian home, but like even with that, it was just like a foundation for it. Everything else is like, you can grow up in a Christian home and not be a Christian.
Right.
You can grow up in a Christian home and still not have the Christian values. And, like for me, it was a big thing because everything that I went through, I don't think I would have do it without God. Like even when I got burnt, like I had to go through like, I had some insecurities, and then I had to learn how to love myself all over again. Like, obviously it happened. And then when I was young, I didn't mean anything until you turn like into like in the teen ages. And then all of a sudden you start looking at yourself like in the eyes of others. And then for me, it's like where faith came and played in, because I had to start loving myself for who God created me to be. And then I had to start looking at, yes, I could blame God for like all the stuff that happened. But then this is like the time where I started learning about, instead of looking at about what God didn't do, or like what people ask, why will God let this happen to you? I'm like, what if, like, I can also look at it as like, God saved me. It could have been worse.
Mhm.
Like, I am still here. I am using my right hand. I'm using, like, so there's like so much to it that for me, I knew God was always good. Like, that has been like a part in my life. Like, so the enemy can lie about different things, like,
Mhm.
about your identity, about, different things. Like, for me, it was like being like, you're ugly, or like, whatever, nobody will ever look at you, or stuff like that.
Mhm.
But, for me, it was like knowing that the truth that God has like instilled in me, like that was like the biggest thing that took me past the whole hand thing. Like, that's
Right.
it's right there. It's not like my leg where like at some point I could hide it. My hand is like right there. Like anything that you do is like right there. So that's something that I had to overcome. And I don't think without faith I will be able to do it. And like mentioned, like when I came here, like we applied for political asylum and we didn't get it. So that means I wasn't legal and yet not illegal. So,
Gotcha.
and then so everything was like in dormant until I turned 18. So that was like the biggest shift in my my life,
Mhm.
and where my faith also grew at that point, because I had applied to go to Malone College and play. I had got like a scholarship to play soccer there and
Mhm.
everything. So, but I got a big letter showing like all the documents that I need. And one of them is like, having a green card or a citizenship thing. But I didn't have any of those documents.
Gotcha.
And then so like this was like about when school is about close to being starting.
Mhm.
And then so like I felt like all my life just went down the drain. I remember just taking off and went jogging like a couple miles or like 3 miles away, and then come back and then trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like where the Holy Spirit was just like had to walk me through all these emotions that I was feeling. And, like college was a big thing. Like I wanted to go to school, I wanted to do a lot of things, but that didn't happen. And so there was a lot of adjustment that I need to do. And then on top of that, that's when I started going to immigration court. So I was
Mhm.
actually in deportation. So I was
Oh
like, yeah,
wow.
I was like in a deportation hearing since I was 18, and I just got my green card when I was 30, so like a couple years ago.
Mhm.
So it's been like how can I say it? When you're like in deportation, it's like you feel like you don't have a ground to step on, because you never know like what's gonna happen in 3 months,
Right.
or the next month, or you just never know what was going to happen, especially with all the immigration laws changing
Mhm.
and just all the immigration talks goes around. So that was pretty much very hard. And you have this pressure of like, oh, just get married and get a green card. Green card.
Right.
I mean, I think you've seen like that. What is it called? 90-day fiance thing.
Right.
Yeah. But for me, like, from a faith point of view, is like marriage for me is sacred. Like,
Right.
so like,
Absolutely.
so I'm like, no, I rather get deported than like having that as like
Right.
it will, like, for me, that will defile the sacredity of marriage.
Mhm.
And so that's not something that like I've ever wanted to. And so that's why one of the reason why it took for us like for a while to like even apply for my green card was because we got married in 2014, but I didn't apply until I left the Y in 2017, just
Mhm.
because things were starting to go a different way. And at that time I was married and we had kids. So
Mhm.
like deportation will not have been a good choice, because one, it'll be separating our
Right.
family. So for me, that's when I was like, you know what? Okay, let's go ahead and do this. So
Right.
again, it's every step of the way, it's always been God. Like,
Absolutely.
to be vulnerable. Like I can't tell you how many times I've like said, I want things to be over. And by over, I mean like I just want to be done. Like,
Mhm.
God, take me away. Like, because sometimes things will get very overwhelming. Like there's times where I feel like I couldn't even see past today. Like I feel
Mhm.
like tomorrow was just too far
much to
away.
bear.
It was like just too much to bear. And like that's why I always say, like, if it wasn't for God, if it wasn't for faith, I honestly don't know where like I will have been. There's sometimes like I have been I've been sitting around and just, I feel like all hope is just like gone down the drain. Like, you just want to like take pills and be done. And
Right.
then, but then at the same time, that's why I'm thankful for the Holy Spirit, because like, if Holy Spirit wasn't there to like lift me up when I didn't have strength to lift myself up, I will have been gone. Like there's just, sometimes it becomes so easy when when you don't have hope
Right.
or when you don't have faith, because the moment things get hard, you just want to disappear, like,
Right.
and then especially when you can't see a glimpse of that light, and I feel like that's what faith is. It's like glimpse of that light when things feel like so dark, like when you feel like you're just so depressed, or you feel like life has no meaning, or things are just don't look up.
Well, I feel I go through the same thing as well, and I think it could even be even God testing your faith as well too. I mean, we have trying to be in the present with everything that's going on in our lives. Like you said, you have something that's like really hard or challenging that you have to get through. It's like, I just want to be done with this. I just want to deal with it. But you have to deal with it. You have to be present, because that's where your faith comes in to help deal with it. I love that. It was,
definitely.
it was very good.
Yeah.
What? How was I going to say this? You hear sometimes, and I prepped you with this earlier, watching the news or whatever, how terrible it is here in America. What would you say to that?
Like in what way? Like in what aspect?
I guess would you agree with that, or I guess do you have a view of like when you hear that of how whatever what Matt was asking?
Well, I mean, we can get into different. I told you, what do you think of the racism thing?
Well,
everybody here is,
Well, I won't say like like my take is always different from like anybody else. Like is racism there? Yeah, definitely there is. Is everybody a racist? No. And for me is like different people have gone through different situation where like racism has played in place, like
was it part of was it tough going to high school?
Like I don't say like it was tougher like going to high school. Like I've only had like, okay, so my first racial experience was like in Cincinnati. Believe it or not, like it was like I won't even call it like, I won't even really call it like a racial experience, that one, because this one was like it was, it sounds like very funny, but it's not. It was between like Africans and African Americans, like, so that's a difference. So there was like see, I had a hard time between that. Like it was
first of all, is that a thing?
That's a thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a thing. And I mean, not for everybody, again, like this is just from a general perspective. There's, again, it's something that happened, and then it's just finding your footing in every area that you go. Like I remember in school, this is like something that happened. I remember in school where we had I had like an African American teacher, and she sat pretty much like all the African American kids in the front, and then like all the Africans and Hispanics, we were like sitting in the back. So like for me that was like a reversal, like a reversal thing. But then I also had like a African American teacher who was very like helped me like navigate through life there. And she even like, like obviously when I go here, I had a very strong accent, like, so I will be reading and all the kids in my class will be like laughing. And then so like that was very discouraging. And then so I went through a hard time with that one. That was like a big change when your accent is very strong. And like, I had another African American teacher who was my history teacher. Like, whenever she asked questions and I answered them, I can't say if she pretended she didn't hear or that's how it felt like to me. Right. Because all my friends next to me who are African American, they could like understand me. And then they will take my answer and then say the answer and then it's correct. So like that usually ticked me off. Like it ticked me off so much. But at the same time, it's like it's like I have reflected on that one, and then so I had to go through like a healing process with that one and like forgive it. But then over here too, I've gone through like when I came to Mount Vernon, it was just like, different. Like where like in high school, I had a kid who was like, I'm racist against black people. And I was like, I don't know why my response was like, yeah, me too. Just to like get I know that was my first response, and like
But that threw him off guard.
I know it did throw him off guard, and then it was like, never say that to me ever again. But at the same time, I was like, why on earth did I even say that? But so that was like the only time I experienced that in school. Like anything else will have been where I didn't notice it or I didn't care. Because like sometimes you learn to like let it go. Like one thing I've learned is like there's those who are gonna try to find everything to offend you,
Right.
and then you're gonna choose how you're gonna react to it. And like I've had kids. Like recently, I started like doing educational aid. I've had kids who have come to me and be like, what are you doing here? This is like white school, like And it was brushed off by another adult that was next to me. But like for me, I wasn't like, I didn't take offense to it. It was like more of like, this is a kid. She's listening to. I mean, again, we had 2020. 2020 was like a year where a lot of things happened, and where a lot of parents probably were talking about how they see things. So like, is it there? I say yes, and kids are picking up from it too. And I've had like, different kids who have experienced it, and their parents are talking to me about it. So yes, it's there, but then everybody experiences it in a different level depending on where they are, and sometimes I don't even think kids, sometimes they know what they're talking about. Like I had a middle school kid just told me like right to my face, I'm like, I was subbing, and he was like, if I was president, I will kill all black people. I'm like, so, or like, and then goes like on Jewish people. I'm like, this is a kid that is like very emotional and stable.
Yeah.
And, so like, what do you say to that?
What did you say?
But this one, like, not saying about like the kids, like part of it, but one thing is, this is just my take. This is part of my teaching part of it. And like, I had to like hold it back because I didn't want to say anything that will start an argument with it. Because one thing for me is like, if it's not going to bring any clarity, don't say it. If it's not going to teach anything, don't say it. And when he said about that stuff, I'm like, I had to take a step back and see like the context of it. And this is a kid that has been through a lot. And for me, like my goal of it was like, it wasn't to address that. My part of it was like to understand where it was coming from. Because for me, I believe like, if you can find the root of the problem, anything else that you do, it'll be just a band-aid. And then it will just like come up again. So like for me is like I had to get to know the kid and know where all of it is coming from. There's always like, I feel for me is like there's always something behind what we do and what we say.
Right.
And sometimes it comes from hurtful relationships, like, or, I don't know. I didn't know anything about him at that time to make any judgments about it. But does it make it right? No, it does not make it right. And I had like later on I addressed it, and we talked about like how it's not appropriate. Like, but
Right.
at the same thing, it comes down to the heart of the person. Like, why did he say that? Like, so, and I have to take it like where the adults in his life might have mentioned that or talked about that. So I feel like when it comes in a whole, like when it comes to that, my take might be different from other people, because like everybody has like their own experience. Like you might have somebody who like lives in a small city where has never experienced it or has never seen it. Or you have like, somebody who's living in a big city where that can be a big part of it, where like, they're in a community where they've like had different experiences.
Right.
So it's very different it's like very difficult to like put it in one, like one answer fits all.
Okay.
Because I feel like depending on where you are and depending on like your circumstance or who you're dealing with, it's different. Like, do I think all cops are bad? No. Do I think there is some bad apples in the bunch?
Right.
Yes, there is. So is it say like all white people are racist? No.
Right.
Is it to say like all black people are the victim of racism? No. Because for me, this is like just my take.
Sure. Yeah.
This
absolutely.
is just my take. But I feel like everybody has their own part of it. Like whether you're black or white, like you can have bunch that are racist and some are not.
Right.
Like one of the things I always like hear was like when I'm talking with some of my friends, like, oh yeah, like so black people are not racist. And I'm like, where did that come from? Yes, black people can be racist too. I'm like, it goes both ways. I'm like, if you're gonna do something that's gonna fall under that, then yes.
Mhm.
Like so for me, is it existence? If that's the question, yes, it is. To what extent, that depends on the situation and where the person is experiencing is coming from.
Okay.
Because there's some areas that experience it more than other places.
Right.
Yeah.
Last question to end on here. I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite Bible verse or scripture that you like to share?
My favorite verse, actually, I think I was like thinking about that this morning. Was like I have so many, but like if I had to pick one, is like one of the ones is like all things works for good. Like he causes all things to work for good, and that's the part that for me that has glued me.
Mhm.
Because and I can't exactly tell you what Bible verse it is, but like that's the content of it.
Right.
Like he makes all things work good for those who
I know
love
which one you're
him.
talking about. I
Yeah.
can't remember the scripture.
Yeah, I
thing,
can remember the address to
Right.
that to that content. But like he causes all things to work for good for those who love him, and
That's a good
that's for me in my life. That's one thing I had to hold on. Like we always talk about the pillars. That's one of the pillars that I have. Like God is good. Like
Mhm.
so no matter what is going on, God is good. And I am His kid, and He's not gonna cause this to happen to me. Like it's like He's there. And like another verse that for me that always follows that, He always has a way of escape for you. So no matter situation that you're in, there's always an escape for it. Like God always has an escape route for you. So like it's matter of like going through a storm is inevitable.
Mhm.
But like it's how you go through the storm that matters. Like, and it's gonna determine how you're gonna come out of it. Like I think if you tie in with like, working out, like,
Mhm.
if you don't put the effort in it, you can't expect to have the results that you want if you don't put the work in it. And that's the same thing when we go through life. It's not gonna be easy, but it's like when you stick to it and don't let the wind blow you,
Right.
yeah, you're gonna make it. So always looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, even when you don't see it.
I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Last thing, can you say faith, family, fitness, and finance in
Swahili.
yeah, Swahili?
I don't think I can say all that. Like, I don't even know how to say fitness in Swahili.
Oh, really?
Because I don't even think I've ever even thought about that. But like, faith is imani.
Money.
Yeah,
Okay.
imani. And family is familia.
Familia.
It sounds like Spanish.
Right. Yeah.
So like, imani, familia. And then what was the other one?
Fitness.
Fitness.
Well,
I
sorry, you
get
can't say.
fixed.
Finance.
You know what? Those two, I don't think I've ever said them in Swahili.
Huh.
All right.
So, like, think about-
what's money.
Money is pesa.
Really?
Yeah, almost
What's,
like peso.
Yeah.
What about What about exercise?
Exercise. See, like exercise, I think like every single time is like it'll be kind of like called cheza, which cheza means play. So,
Oh, okay.
and then that's the same thing you'll use for like I'm exercising or I'm playing. It's
Or like I'm working
yeah.
out. Or
So-
is workout a thing?
I don't think I've ever had that vocabulary used. Like yeah,
That's super interesting.
like I mean, in French will be like faire du sport, but
What are there gyms where you're from, or is it just you're farming and you're?
I think now there are, but like you have to remember like it was like a 13-year-old me coming here, so like
Right.
I wasn't going to gyms. My gym was outside.
Well, right.
outside playing.
Yeah, she's like Americans had to like make someone to make people work out because they're so lazy,
Yeah.
and they just
Right.
she's in Kenya. They were all active.
They do have gyms. They do have gyms, but like the thing is like you have to remember like my vocabulary in pretty much like Swahili or Kirundi
Stop it.
is like it's think about like your 13-year-old this vocabulary
that's
that they
true.
won't have.
Right.
So like no, I don't think. And then I've never had even talk about finances when I was
Right.
there. So like even for me, like right now speaking Swahili to like somebody, like some of my classmates, I feel like so like I don't even know anything just because like you know how like language of like you know like
Mhm.
evolves over time. So it's interesting,
Well,
but
you've now been here longer than you were there.
yes,
Right.
yes, because like I came when I was 13 and I'm 32. I think I'm 32.
Okay.
My daughter has to keep me track on
Details,
that
yeah.
one.
Well, thank you, Esther Chester, for coming in. That was absolutely amazing. Thanks for sharing all that.
You
That
are
was
very
that was
welcome.
very, very cool. Thank you. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. And we'll see you in the gym soon.